When you think about the tech world, it changes so fast. So how does a company, any company, manage to stay right at the front? Not just relevant, but actually leading for like over 100 years. I mean, navigating huge tech shifts, market chaos, even wars.
It's a tough question. Today, we're going to try and answer that by doing a deep dive into the history of a company that's done just that. International Business Machines, or as pretty much everyone knows it, IBM.
Yeah, and our sources for this, they give us this really comprehensive historical picture. It takes us right from the start, when IBM was basically cobbled together from different business machine companies, all the way to today, where they're this tech giant focused on AI and hybrid cloud.
Right. So our mission today is to kind of pull apart the big moments, the innovations that maybe surprise you, the big bets they took, and yeah, even the controversies that shaped IBM and honestly shaped a lot of the tech world we live in now. Hopefully you'll walk away not just knowing more, but maybe with a new appreciation for what it takes to play the long game in tech.
Adapting that.
Right. The long game.
Okay, let's dive in. Before we even get to digital computers, I mean, how did a company build its whole foundation on like automating business transactions? It sounds almost basic now.
It does sound basic now, but back then it was absolutely cutting edge. So IBM's roots go back to the 1880s, really. But the company we know sort of formally started in 1911. It was called the Computing Tabulating Recording Company, CTR for short.
CTR, okay.
And it wasn't just one invention. It was actually a merger, an amalgamation of 4 different companies. You had Bundy Manufacturing. They made time clocks. Herman Hollerith's tabulating machine company, that's a key one. Then the International Time Recording Company, another time clock firm, and the Computing Scale Company of America. So scales, clocks, and tabulators.
So Hollerith's part of the tabulating machine company, that was the data processing bit, right? The punch cards?
Exactly. Hollerith was the pioneer there. His punch card system, it was famously used for the 1890 U.S. Census, and it was a game changer. Well, the census got done in about 6 years. Before that, it took nearly a decade. And it saved the government. Estimates are around $5 million, which was a fortune back then.
Wow.
And his influence lasted. The 80-column card they introduced later in 1928 became the standard, the IBM card, for something like 70 years. Incredible.
What's wild?
Yeah.
Okay, then Thomas J. Watson Sr. enters the picture. He comes in around 1914. President by 1915. He really set the course, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Watson Sr. had a very clear strategy. He wanted this incredibly motivated, well-paid sales force. But here's the key. They weren't just selling machines.
Right.
They were trained to figure out solutions for customers. Customers who often had no idea how to use this newfangled technology. It was very consultative, very customer-focused.
And he's the one who gave CTR the name IBM.
Yep, that was him. In 1924, they rebranded to International Business Machines. It wasn't just a name change. It signaled, bigger ambitions, global reach, moving beyond just being seen as an office appliance maker.
He also built this really unique corporate culture. The Think slogan. Everyone knows that. But he did more, especially during the Depression, which seems counterintuitive.
It really was visionary for the era. Think started way back in 1915, but he backed it up. He started employee education, the IBM schoolhouse in 33, group life insurance in 34, paid vacations in 36.
During the Depression.
During the Depression. While other companies were cutting back, laying people off, Watson was actually hiring more salespeople, more engineers. He was investing, betting on the future. It was a huge gamble, really a bet the company moment.
That's some serious long-term thinking. But then came this massive government contract, the Social Security Act. That must have been pivotal.
Oh, completely pivotal. It was described as the biggest accounting operation of all time. IBM got the contract to maintain employment records for 26 million people. This deal basically propelled IBM's success through the rest of the 30s.
Was there any pushback? Like, people worried about one company handling all that sensitive data?
Not really in a major public way back then. The government needed a solution fast, and IBM had the proven tech. And what's fascinating, connecting the dots here, is how IBM wove everything together right from the start. The tech innovation, the strong culture Watson built, and this focus on huge government clients, it created this incredibly resilient business, even in tough economic times. That Social Security bet paid off massively.
But even then, they weren't totally controversy-free. They hit their first antitrust snag pretty early on.
That's right. 1936, a consent decree. IBM had to agree to stop forcing customers who leased their tabulating machines to also buy their punch cards.
Oh.
It seems minor, but it basically created a separate market for punch cards. And yeah, it was definitely a sign of the legal battles IBM would face down the road.
So they grow domestically, navigate the Depression, and then the world changes dramatically again with World War II. How did that shift IBM's path?
Well, like many American companies, IBM shifted heavily to support the U.S. war effort.
Yeah.
Their factories started making military gear, Browning automatic rifles, M1 carbines, engine parts.
Wow, guns too.
Yeah, and they did it with a nominal 1% profit, which they apparently used for funds for families of war casualties.
And their main business, the tabulating equipment, that was still crucial.
Absolutely critical. IBM machines were doing complex calculations for the Manhattan Project down at Los Alamos.
The atomic bomb.
Yes. And they also worked with the Navy on the Harvard Mark I, which was this huge early electromechanical calculator. Their tech was deeply embedded in the war effort.
But there's also a much darker, more complex side to IBM's wartime story involving their German subsidiary, DOMAG, and Nazi Germany. This requires some careful handling.
It absolutely does. It's a deeply troubling chapter. IBM's German subsidiary, the DOMAG, which IBM majority-owned, supplied Hollerith punch card machines to the Nazi regime.
And what were they used for?
They were used for various administrative tasks, which included critically organizing census data and identifying populations, including Jewish people. This technology unfortunately aided the regime in carrying out its systematic persecution and ultimately the Holocaust.
There was a book about this, right? IBM and the Holocaust.
Yes, by Edwin Black. He argued that IBM headquarters in the U.S. maintained significant control and awareness of DOMAG's activities, even continuing business relationships during the war. IBM's stance has generally been that while the subsidiary operated, headquarters lost effective control during the war, and that Black's book didn't reveal new facts beyond what was known about DOMAG's existence and its use by the Nazis.
So it's a complex historical debate.
It is. It raises profound questions about corporate responsibility, especially when technology developed for neutral purposes like efficiency gets used by oppressive regimes. It forces us to think about complicity versus the realities of operating internationally during wartime. Technical neutrality doesn't mean moral neutrality. It's a crucial point.
A very heavy but important part of their history. Okay, moving past the war, there's a leadership change. Thomas J. Watson Jr. takes the helm.
Right. Watson Jr. becomes CEO in 1956, though he'd been president since '52. He really saw the future was in electronic computers, not just the older tabulators, and pushed for a radical reorganization to embrace that.
And he also made waves with corporate policy, didn't he? Even before the Civil Rights Act.
He did. Way back in 1953, he issued a formal equal opportunity policy letter for IBM. That was a full 11 years before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 became law. It was quite progressive for a major corporation at the time.
So IBM starts seriously moving into electronic computers. What were the first big steps?
They launched the IBM 701 in 1952, their first big commercial electronic computer. Then the IBM 650 followed and became really popular. And a key decision came in 1957. Watson Jr. mandated that all new machines had to use transistors, solid-state circuitry, moving away from the less reliable vacuum tubes.
That was a big technological leap. And they weren't just building the hardware, they started getting into software and storage, too. That feels very modern.
It was the beginning of it all. They worked with the U.S. government on projects like the SABRE air defense system. That work led directly to the SABRE airline reservation system.
SABRE, okay.
So,
still around today.
Exactly. And SABRE was significant because it was the first time IBM was really writing software specifically for a customer, not just selling the machines. And then in 1956, a huge innovation. The IBM 350, the world's first magnetic hard disk drive. Suddenly, you could store and access large amounts of data efficiently.
But the antitrust issues didn't go away. Another consent decree in '56.
Yes, another one. This 1956 decree was pretty significant. It forced IBM to actually sell equipment, not just lease it, which had been their dominant model.
Ah, okay.
And they also had to license their patents more broadly. This really opened the door for competition companies selling used IBM gear, independent firms offering maintenance, and importantly, plug-compatible manufacturers making hardware that could work with IBM systems. It definitely spurred new markets.
So, looking back at that post-war period, IBM basically transforms itself. From tabulators to computers, pioneers equal opportunity, invents the hard drive, but always under the shadow of government scrutiny and dealing with that complex wartime legacy.
Yeah, it was a period of massive change, huge innovation, and navigating some really tricky waters, both ethically and legally. They were becoming the giant, but it wasn't a smooth ride.
Okay, so the 1960s arrived. This is when IBM really becomes Big Blue, right?
Yeah.
But also when things started changing in ways that would reshape the entire industry.
Absolutely. The defining product of that era, maybe IBM's most famous ever, was the System 360, launched in 1964.
System 360, what made it so revolutionary?
It was a family of computers, different sizes, different price points, but critically, they could all run the same software and use the same peripherals, printers, tape drives, etc.
Ah, interchangeable parts and software. We take that for granted now.
Exactly. Before System 360, upgrading often meant rewriting all your software. This unified architecture was a massive gamble for IBM, cost billions, but it paid off hugely. It became the industry standard and really cemented IBM's dominance. They became the computer company.
But then, just a few years later, 1969, they make another huge move, maybe even more impactful long-term.
Yeah.
Unbundling. What was that about?
Right. So before 69, when you bought or leased an IBM computer, the price included the hardware, the software, maintenance support, everything bundled together.
Okay.
In 1969, partly maybe because of ongoing antitrust concerns, IBM decided to start charging separately for software and services. They unbundled them from the hardware price.
And that had a massive ripple effect.
Huge. If you connect the dots, this decision basically created the modern software and services industry. Suddenly, there was a clear market value for software itself. It allowed independent software companies and service providers to emerge and compete. It fundamentally changed the economics of computing forever. An unintended consequence, maybe, but massive.
Wow. So they're dominating with hardware, accidentally kickstarting the software industry. What other innovations came out of this period?
Still tons. They invented DRAM, dynamic random access memory, in '66, which is still the basis for most computer memory.
Right.
An IBM researcher, Benoit Mandelbrot, came up with the concept of fractal geometry in '67, and in '69, they developed the magnetic stripe technology that ended up on practically every credit card in the world.
So innovation was firing on all cylinders. But the government wasn't letting up on the antitrust front.
Not at all. In 1969, the same year as unbundling, the U.S. Department of Justice launched another major antitrust suit against IBM, alleging monopolization of the computer market.
And this one dragged on for ages.
13 years. It was finally dropped in 1982, the government concluding it was without merit, but for over a decade, it was this huge distraction for IBM's leadership, consuming time and resources right when the tech landscape was starting to shift again.
And that next shift was the personal computer. IBM, the mainframe giant, actually jumped into that market pretty early.
They did. August 12, 1981, they launched the IBM PC. It was built by this sort of skunkworks team down in Boca Raton, Florida, and crucially, they used off-the-shelf components to get it done fast.
And is a hit.
An instant massive success. It brought computing to small businesses, desktops, even some homes. The little tramp ads with the Charlie Chaplin figure were iconic. The IBM PC really legitimized the whole idea of a personal computer for business.
But, and this is a huge but in their history, the way they built it had this enormous unintended consequence.
The biggest, perhaps. To get the PC out quickly, they made two fateful decisions. They outsourced the operating system to a tiny company called Microsoft.
Heard with them.
And they outsourced the microprocessor chip to Intel.
Right.
It worked great for launching the PC fast, but the irony is IBM essentially handed over control of the two key components that define the platform, the OS and the chip architecture, to outside companies.
So anyone could clone it.
Exactly. It created the entire IBM-compatible or PC clone market. Companies like Compaq, Dell, Gateway, they could build machines that ran the same software using the same chips, often cheaper. IBM created the market but quickly lost control of it. The source of their previous mainframe monopoly power control of the architecture was gone in the PC world.
And this, combined with other issues, led IBM into serious trouble by the late 80s, early 90s.
Deep trouble. They were seen as this huge, slow-moving, bloated organization, still heavily invested in mainframes, which were profitable but shrinking relative to the PC boom, and they were struggling in lower-margin commodity businesses.
The PC and the rise of client-server computing were undermining their core business.
Precisely. The result, massive financial losses. Over $8 billion lost in 1993 alone, nearly $16 billion lost between 91 and 93. People were seriously writing IBM off as this dinosaur headed for extinction.
It's incredible. The era that cemented Big Blue also sowed the seeds of its near destruction because of how they handled the PC revolution. A real lesson there.
A huge lesson about how quickly dominance can evaporate if you misread the next wave.
So IBM is on the ropes, bleeding money, looking like a relic. Then comes one of the most famous corporate turnarounds ever.
Absolutely remarkable. In April 1993, they brought in Louis V. Gerstner Jr. as CEO. Critically, he was an outsider, the first since Watson Sr. way back in 1914. He came from RJR Nabisco, not a tech background.
And his first big move was controversial.
Well, the plan already on the table was to break IBM up into smaller, independent companies, the baby blues. Gerstner came in and said, no, stop everything.
Why?
He recognized that IBM's real strength, the thing customers valued, wasn't just the individual pieces of hardware or software, but its ability to provide integrated solutions, to solve complex business problems. Breaking it up would destroy that core value.
So keep it whole. But how did he turn things around? It was bleeding cash.
He executed a massive strategic shift, focused relentlessly on high-margin businesses. That meant getting out of low-margin ones. Eventually, in 2005, they sold off the entire PC division, the one they started, to Lenovo.
Wow. Sold the PC business.
Yep. Instead, they built up a huge, profitable global services business. Consulting, systems integration, outsourcing. They bought PricewaterhouseCoopers' consulting arm in 2002 to boost that.
And software.
Big focus on software, especially middleware, the complex stuff that connects different corporate systems. They bought Lotus Development in '95 for Lotus Notes and built up their portfolio with DB2 databases, WebSphere, Tivoli management software, high value, high margin stuff.
So changing the business mix, did they also manage to bring back some of the IBM cool factor, the innovation image?
They did work on that too. The ThinkPad laptops, actually launched just before Gerstner in '92, were a huge success. Great design, great functionality. They really had cachet.
Ah, the ThinkPads. Love those.
Then came the big AI milestones. Deep Blue, the chess computer, beating Garry Kasparov in 1997. That was huge news, a real demonstration of machine intelligence.
Right, I remember that.
And then Watson winning on the TV game show Jeopardy in 2011. That really brought AI into the public imagination in a big way. And fittingly, 2011 was also their 100th anniversary, a century old and still reinventing itself.
So the turnaround worked. Fast forward to more recent times, they've kept pivoting, right, towards cloud and AI.
Relentlessly. The biggest sign of that was the massive $34 billion acquisition of Red Hat in 2018.
Red Hat, the open source software company.
Exactly. That was all about strengthening their position in hybrid cloud, helping companies manage applications across their own data centers and public clouds, and bolstering their AI offerings. It was a huge bet on that future direction.
And then, even more recently, another massive restructuring.
Yeah.
Splitting the company.
Yes, announced in 2020, executed in 2021. They spun off their legacy managed infrastructure services division, the business that runs IT systems for other companies, into a completely separate public company called Kyndryl.
Why do that?
To allow IBM itself to focus even more tightly on those higher growth, higher margin areas. Hybrid cloud and artificial intelligence, powered by Red Hat and their own innovations. Kyndryl takes the lower margin, more labor-intensive infrastructure business. It's another step in that constant reinvention. And, looking at this whole sweep of history, the constant theme is this willingness, sometimes forced, sometimes proactive, to completely redefine itself. Survival in tech, especially for over a century, isn't just about inventing the next gadget. It's about shedding old skin, pivoting strategies, sometimes drastically, to meet a market that never, ever stops changing.
So what a journey. Over 100 years, from punch cards and time clocks, through mainframes, PCs, software services, controversies, near-death experiences, and now focusing on AI and hybrid cloud. It's just an incredible story of adaptation.
It really is. They've faced just about every kind of shift imaginable: technological, market dynamics, global politics, ethical challenges. From mechanical devices to cognitive computing, it's quite something.
And IBM's story, I think, is a powerful lesson. It shows how even the biggest, most dominant companies have to evolve, constantly fight their own inertia just to stay in the game. No one's immune to disruption, but how you respond strategically, that can define everything. So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We see this giant IBM having to repeatedly shed parts of its business, fundamentally change its identity just to survive and hopefully thrive. What does that mean for the rest of us? For individuals in our careers, for smaller companies? How much of our own legacy, the way we've always done things, our comfort zones, might we need to let go of to really grab the future? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of IBM. Until next time, keep thinking and keep exploring.